I'll start this by saying, Peter Terry was a heroin addict. We were friends in college, and continued to be after I graduated. Notice that I said I. He dropped out after 2 years of barely cutting it. After I moved out of the dorms and into a small apartment, I didn't see Peter as much. We would talk online every now and then. There was a period where he wasn't on for about 5 weeks straight. I wasn't worried. He was a pretty notorious flake and drug addict, so I assumed he just stopped caring. Then one night I saw him log on. Before I could initiate a conversation, he sent me a message. David, we need to talk. That was when he told me about the No End House. He got that name because no one had reached the final exit. The rules were simple and cliché. Reach the final room of the building and you win $500. There were 9 rooms in all. The house was located outside the city, roughly 4 miles from my house. Apparently, Peter had tried and failed. He was a heroin addict, so I figured the drugs got the best of him and he wigged out at a paper ghost or something. He told me it would be too much for anyone, that it was unnatural. I didn't believe him. I told him I would check it out the next night, and no matter how hard he tried to convince me otherwise, $500 sounded too good to be true. I had to go. I set out the following night. When I arrived, I immediately noticed something strange about the building. Have you ever seen or read something that shouldn't be scary, but for some reason a chill crawls up your spine? I walked toward the building, and the feeling of uneasiness only intensified as I opened the front door. My heart slowed and I let a relieved sigh leave me as I entered. The room looked like a normal hotel lobby decorated for Halloween. A sign was posted in the place of a worker. It read, "Room 1, this way. 8 more follow. Reach the end, and you win." I chuckled and made my way to the first door. The first area was almost laughable. The decor resembled a Halloween aisle of a Kmart, complete with street ghosts and animatronic zombies that gave a static growl when you passed by. At the far end was an exit. It was the only door besides the one I entered through. I brushed through the fake spiderwebs and headed for the second room. I was greeted by fog as I opened the door to room 2. The room definitely upped the ante in terms of technology. Not only was there a fog machine, but a bat hung from the ceiling and flew in a circle. Scary. They seemed to have a Halloween soundtrack that one would find in a 99-cent store on loop somewhere in the room. I didn't see a stereo, but I guess they must have a PA system. I stepped over a few toy rats that wheeled around and walked with a puffed chest to the next area. I reached for the doorknob, and my heart sank. I didn't want to open that door. A feeling of dread hit me so hard, I could barely think. Logic overtook me after a few moments. I shook it off and entered the next room. Room 3 is when things changed. On the surface, it looked like a normal room. There was a chair in the middle of the wood-paneled floor. A single lamp in the corner did a pretty poor job of lighting the area. It was casting a few shadows across the floor and walls. That was the problem. Shadows, plural. With the exception of the chairs, there were others. I barely walked in the door, and I was scared. It was at that moment that I knew something wasn't right. I didn't even think as I automatically tried to open the door I came through. It was locked from the other side. That set me off. Was someone locking the doors as I progressed? There was no way. I would have heard them. Was it a mechanical lock that set automatically? Maybe. But I was too scared to really think. I turned back to the room and the shadows were gone. The chair's shadow remained, but the others were gone. I slowly walked forward. I used to hallucinate when I was a kid, so I wrote off the shadows as a figment of my imagination. I started to feel a little better as I made it to the halfway point of the room. And then I looked down as I took my steps. And that's when I saw it. Or didn't see it, I should say. My shadow wasn't there. I didn't even wait to scream. I ran as fast as I could to the other door and flung myself out without thinking into the room beyond. The fourth room was disturbing. As I closed the door, all of the light seemed to be sucked out and put back into the previous room. I stood there, surrounded by darkness. I wasn't able to move. I'm not afraid of the dark, and I never have been. But I was scared. All of my sight left. I had my hand in front of my face, and if I didn't know what I was doing, I wouldn't have been able to tell. Darkness doesn't describe it. I couldn't hear anything. It was a dead silence. When you're in a soundproof room, you can still hear yourself breathing. You can hear yourself alive. I couldn't. I stumbled forward after a few moments. My rapidly beating heart was the only thing I could feel. There was no door in sight. I wasn't even sure there was one this time. And then the silence was broken by a low hum. I felt something behind me. I spun around wildly, but could barely even see my nose, let alone what was in front of me. But I knew it was there. Regardless of how dark it was, I knew something was there. The hum grew louder, closer. It seemed to surround me, but I knew whatever was causing the noise was in front of me, inching closer. I took a step back. I never felt that kind of fear before. I can't really describe true fear. I wasn't even scared that I was gonna die. I was scared of what the alternative was. I was afraid of what this thing had in store for me. Then the lights flashed for a second. And I saw it. Nothing. I saw nothing. And I know I saw nothing there. The room was again plunged into darkness. And the hum became a wild screech. I screamed in protest. I couldn't hear the sound for another minute. I ran backwards away from the noise. I fumbled for the door handle. I found it. I turned and fell into room 5. And before I describe room 5, you have to understand something. I am not Peter. I've never had a history of drug abuse, any sort of psychosis, short of the childhood hallucinations that I mentioned, but those were only when I was tired or waking up. I entered No End House with a clear mind. After I fell in, my view of room 5 was from my back, looking up at the ceiling. It didn't scare me, it just surprised me. Trees had grown into the room and towered above my head. The ceilings in this room were taller than the others, which made me think I was in the center of the house. I got up off the floor, dusted myself off, and I looked around. It was definitely the largest room of them all. I couldn't even see the door from where I was. Various brush and trees were blocking my line of sight. Up to this point, I assumed the rooms were just going to be scarier and scarier and scarier, but this was paradise compared to the last room. And I also assumed that whatever was in room 4 stayed there. As I made my way deeper into the room, I began to hear what one would hear if they were in a forest. Chirping bugs, the occasional flap of birds, seemed to be my only company in this room. But that was the thing that bothered me. I heard the bugs and other animals, but I didn't see them. I began to wonder how big this house was. From the outside, when I first walked up to it, it looked like a normal house. It was definitely on the bigger side, but this was almost a full forest in here. The canopy covered my view of the ceiling, but I assumed it was still there, however high it was. I couldn't see the walls. The only way that I knew I was still inside was that the floor matched the other rooms. Standard dark wood paneling. I kept walking, hoping that the next tree I passed would reveal the door. After a few moments, I felt a mosquito fly onto my arm. I shook it off and kept going. A second later, I felt about 10 more land on my skin. I felt them crawl up and down my arms and legs, and a few made their way across my face. Naturally, I flailed at them to get them all off, but they just kept crawling. And I looked down, and I whimpered, to be honest. I didn't see a single bug. Not one bug was on me. I could feel them crawl. I heard them fly by my face and sting my skin, but I couldn't see them. I dropped to the ground and I started to roll. I was desperate. I hated bugs, especially ones that I couldn't see or touch. But these bugs could touch me, and they were everywhere. I crawled. I had no idea where I was going. The entrance was nowhere in sight. I still hadn't even seen the exit. So I just crawled. My skin wriggled with the presence of those phantom bugs. After what seemed like hours, I found the door. I grabbed the nearest tree and I pulled myself up. I was slapping my arms and legs, no avail. I tried to run, but I couldn't. I was exhausted from crawling and dealing with whatever was on me. I took a few steps to the door, grabbing onto trees for support. I was only a few feet away when I heard it. The low hum from before. It was coming from the next room, and it was deeper. I could almost feel it. Like when you stand next to an amp at a concert. The feeling of the bugs on me lessened as the hum grew louder. As I placed my hand on the doorknob, the bugs were completely gone. I couldn't bring myself to turn it. I knew if I let go, the bugs would return. And there was no way I could make it back to room 4. I just stood there, my head pressed against the door, marked 6. My hand grasping the knob. The hum was so loud I couldn't even hear myself pretend to think. There was nothing I could do but move on. Room 6 was next. And room 6 was hell. I closed the door behind me. My eyes held shut and my ears ringing. The hum was surrounding me. As the door clicked into place, the hum was gone. I opened my eyes in surprise and the door I had shut was gone. It was just a wall now. I looked around. The room is identical to room 3. The same chair, same lamp, but with the correct amount of shadows this time. The only real difference was that there was no exit door, and the one I came in through was gone. As I said before, I had no previous issues in terms of mental instability, but at that moment I fell into what I know now was insanity. I didn't scream. I didn't make a sound. At first, I scratched softly. The wall was tough, but I knew the door was there somewhere. I just knew it was. I scratched at where the doorknob was. I clawed at the wall with both hands, my nails being filed down to the skin against the wood. I fell silently to my knees. The only sound in the room was the incessant scratching against the wall. I knew it was there. The door was there. I knew it was. I knew if I could just get past this wall.
Are you alright?
I jumped off the ground and looked behind me. There was a little girl. She was wearing a soft, white dress that went down to her ankles. She had long, blonde hair to the middle of her back, white skin, and blue eyes. When I was looking at her, I saw something else. Where she stood, I saw what looked like a man's body, but larger than normal and covered in hair. His head wasn't human, and his toes were hooves. Its head was that of a ram, and the snout of a wolf. It was horrifying, and it was synonymous with the little girl in front of me. They were the same form. I can't really describe it, but I saw them. At the same time, in the same spot in that room. When I saw the girl, I saw it. When I saw it, I saw the girl. I couldn't speak. I could barely even see. My mind was revolting against what I was trying to process. I just stood there, staring at whatever it was that spoke to me. There was no exit. I was trapped here with it. And then it spoke again.
David, you should have listened.
When it spoke, I heard the words of the little girl. But the others spoke through my mind in a voice I won't attempt to describe. There is no other sound. The voice just kept repeating that sentence over and over in my mind, and I agreed. I didn't know what to do. I was slipping into madness, yet I couldn't take my eyes off of what was in front of me. I dropped to the floor. I thought I had passed out, but the room wouldn't let me. I just wanted it to end. I was on my side, my eyes wide open and the form staring down at me. Scurrying across the floor in front of me was one of the battery-powered rats from the second room. The house was toying with me. But for some reason, seeing that rat pulled my mind back from whatever depths it was headed. And I looked around the room. I was getting out of here. I was determined to get out of that house and live, and never think about that place again. At first, it was just my eyes that moved. I searched the walls for any kind of opening. The room wasn't that big, so it didn't take long to soak up the entire layout. The demon still taunted me, the voice growing louder as the form stayed rooted where it stood. I placed my hand on the floor, lifted myself up to all fours, and turned to scan the wall behind me. Then I saw something I couldn't believe. The form was now right at my back, whispering into my mind how I shouldn't have come. I felt its breath on the back of my neck, but I refused to turn around. The large rectangle was scratched into the wood, with a small dent chipped away in the center of it. Right in front of my eyes, I saw the large 7 that I had mindlessly etched into the wall. I knew what it was. Room 7 was just beyond that wall, where room 5 was moments ago. I don't know how I did it. Maybe it was just my state of mind at the time, but I created the door. I know I had. In my madness, I scratched into the wall what I needed the most. An exit. Room 7 was close. I knew the demon was right behind me, but for some reason, it couldn't touch me. I closed my eyes, placed both hands on the large 7 in front of me, and I pushed. I pushed as hard as I could. The demon was now screaming in my ear. It told me I was never leaving. It told me that this was the end. But I wasn't going to die. I was going to live there in room 6 with it. I pushed and screamed at the top of my lungs. I knew I was going to push through the wall eventually. I clenched my eyes shut, and the demon was gone. I was left in silence. I turned around slowly and was greeted by the room as it was when I entered. Just a chair and a lamp. I couldn't believe it, but I didn't have time to wait. I turned back to the 7 and jumped back slightly. There was a door. It wasn't the one I had scratched in, but a regular door with a large 7 on it. My whole body was shaking. It took me a while to turn the knob. I just stood there, staring at the door. I couldn't stay here. But if this was only room 6, I couldn't imagine what 7 had in store. Must have stood there for an hour, staring at 7. Finally, with a deep breath, I twisted the knob and opened the door. I stumbled through the door mentally exhausted and physically weak. The door behind me closed and I realized where I was. I was outside. Not outside like room 5, but actually outside. My eyes stung. I wanted to cry. I fell to my knees and tried, but I couldn't. I was finally out. I didn't even care about the prize I was promised. I turned and saw that the door that I just went through was the entrance. I walked to my car and drove home, thinking of how nice the shower sounded. As I pulled up to my house, I felt uneasy. The joy of leaving No End House had faded, and dread was slowly building in my stomach. I shook it off as residual from the house and made my way to the front door. I entered and immediately went up to my room. On my bed was my cat. He was the first living thing I had seen all night, and I reached to pet him. And he hissed and swiped at my hand. I pulled back in shock as he never acted like that before. I thought, whatever, he's an old cat. I got in the shower and got ready for what I was expecting to be a sleepless night. After my shower, I went to the kitchen to make something to eat. I walked down the stairs and turned into the family room. And my parents were lying on the ground, covered in blood. They were mutilated to near unidentifiable states. Their limbs were removed and placed next to their bodies. And their heads were placed on their chests, facing me. And they were smiling, as though they were happy to see me. I didn't know what had happened. They didn't even live with me at the time. I was a mess. And then I saw it. A door that was never there before. A door with a large 8 scrawled on it with blood. I was still in the house. The faces of my parents smiled wider as I realized this. They weren't my parents, they couldn't be. But they looked exactly like them. The door marked 8 was across the room behind the bodies in front of me. I knew I had to move on, but those faces tore into my mind. They grounded me where I stood. The hum returned. It was louder than ever and it filled the house, shook the walls. The hum compelled me to walk. I walked slowly, making my way closer to the door and the bodies. I could barely stand, let alone walk. The walls were shaking so hard it seemed as though they were about to crumble. But the faces still smiled at me. As I inched closer, their eyes followed me. I was now between the two bodies, a few feet away from the door. The dismembered hands clawed their way across the carpet to me. And the faces continued to stare. I walked faster. I didn't want to hear them speak. I didn't want the voices to match my parents. They began to open their mouths, and the hands were inches from my feet. In a dash of desperation, I lunged toward the door, threw it open, and slammed it behind me. Room 8. After what I had just experienced, I knew there was nothing else this house could throw at me that I couldn't live through. There was nothing short of the fires of hell itself that I wasn't ready for. Unfortunately, I underestimated the abilities of No End House. Things got more disturbing, more terrifying, and more unspeakable in Room 8. The room was a carbon copy of rooms 3 and 6, but sitting in the usually empty chair was a man. After a few seconds of disbelief, my mind finally accepted the fact that the man sitting in the chair was me. Not someone who looked like me. It was David Williams. I walked closer. I had to get a better look, even though I was sure of it. He looked up at me. There were tears in his eyes. Please. Please. Don't do it. Please. Don't hurt me. What? Who are you? I'm not gonna hurt you. Yes, you are. You're going to hurt me, and I don't want you to. He sat in the chair with his legs up and began rocking back and forth. Listen, who are you? I was now only a couple feet from my doppelganger. It was the weirdest experience yet, standing there, talking to myself. I wasn't afraid. Why are you? You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me. If you want to leave, you're going to hurt me. Why are you saying this? Just calm down, alright? Let's try and figure this. And then I saw it. David sitting down was wearing the same clothes as me, except for a small red patch on his shirt, embroidered with the number 9. My eyes didn't leave that small number on his chest. I knew exactly what it was. The first few doors were plain and simple, but after a while they got a little more ambiguous. 7 was scratched into the wall, but by my own hand. 8 marked in blood, above my parents. 9? The number was on a person. A living person. And worse still, it was me. David? Yes. You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me. He answered to my name. He was me. Right down to the voice. But that 9. I paced around for a few minutes while he sobbed in his chair. The room had no door, similar to room 6. The door I came through was gone. I assumed that scratching would get me nowhere this time. I studied the walls and floor around the chair, sticking my head underneath to see if anything was below. Unfortunately, there was. Below the chair was a knife, with a tag that read, "To David, from management." The feeling in my stomach as I read that tag was sinister. The last thing I wanted to do was remove that knife from under that chair. My mind was spinning into an attic of unanswerable questions. Who put this here? How did they get my name? Not to mention the fact that as I knelt on the cold wood floor, I also sat in the chair. It was all too much to process. The house and the management had been playing with me this whole time. My thoughts turned to Peter, and whether or not he got this far. If he did, if he met a Peter Terry, sobbing in this very chair, rocking back and forth. I shook those thoughts out of my head. They didn't matter. I took the knife from under the chair, and immediately, the other David went quiet. "David," he said in my voice, "what do you think you're going to do?" "I'm going to get out of here." David was still sitting in the chair, though he was very calm now. He looked up at me with a slight grin. I couldn't tell if he was going to laugh or strangle me. Slowly, he got up from the chair and stood, facing me. It was uncanny. His height, even the way he stood, matched mine. I felt the rubber hilt of the knife in my hand, gripped it tighter. I don't know what I was planning on doing with it, but I had a feeling I was going to need it. Now, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you, and I'm going to keep you here. I didn't respond. I just lunged and tackled him to the ground. I mounted him and looked down, knife poised and ready. He looked up at me, terrified. It was like I was looking in a mirror. Then the hum returned, low and distant, though I still felt it deep in my body. David looked up at me as I looked down at him. The hum was getting louder. I felt something inside me snap. With one motion, I slammed the knife into the patch on his chest and ripped down. Blackness fell on the room, and I was falling. The darkness around me was like nothing I had experienced before. Room 4 was dark, but it didn't come close to what was engulfing me. I wasn't even sure if I was falling after a while. I felt weightless, covered in the darkness. And a deep sadness came over me. I felt lost, depressed even. The sight of my parents entered my mind. I knew it wasn't real, but I had seen it, and the sadness only deepened. I was in room 9 for what seemed like days. The final room. And that's exactly what it was. The end. No end house had an end, and I had reached it. I knew I would be in that in-between state forever, accompanied by nothing but darkness. Even the hum had gone. I couldn't feel myself. I couldn't hear anything. Sight was useless here. I searched for a taste in my mouth. There was nothing. I felt disembodied and completely lost. I knew where I was. This was room 9. Then it happened. A light. One of those stereotypical lights at the end of the tunnel. I felt ground come up from below me, and I was standing. After a moment or two of gathering my thoughts and senses, I slowly walked toward that light. As I approached the light, it took form. It was a vertical slit down the side of an unmarked door. I slowly walked through the door and found myself back where I started. The lobby of No End House. It was exactly how I left it. Still empty, still decorated with childish Halloween decorations. After everything that had happened, I was still wary of where I was. After a few moments of normalcy, I looked around the place trying to find anything different. On the desk was a plain white envelope with my name handwritten on it. Immensely curious yet still cautious, I mustered up the courage to open the envelope. Inside was a letter, again handwritten. David Williams, congratulations. You have made it to the end of No End House. Please accept this prize as a token of great achievement. Yours forever, Management. With the letter were 5 $100 bills. I laughed. I couldn't stop laughing. I laughed for what seemed like hours. I laughed as I walked out to my car. I laughed as I drove home. I laughed as I pulled into my driveway. I laughed as I opened my front door to my house. And I laughed as I saw the small 10 etched into the wood.